The bullet missed my head by an inch, which was impressive, considering I hadn't even finished introducing myself. Brick exploded behind me in a neat, irritated puff of red dust. I didn't flinch. That was rule number 1 of negotiation: never reward bad behavior with movement. Well, I said calmly, brushing grit from my coat sleeve. I'll assume that was enthusiasm and not an official counteroffer. 14 wolves stood in a tense semicircle beneath the fractured ceiling of the warehouse. Headlights from 2 idling SUVs cut white blades through the dark. The air smelled like salt water and rust, and the kind of damp concrete that had given up on ever being dry again. No one laughed. Their eyes glowed faintly in the half-light, gold amber, one a sharp, unnatural green. They weren't in full shift, but the tension in the room was thick with fur and fang just beneath the surface. Behind me, Liam exhaled once. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't need to. Liam was the kind of alpha who didn't announce violence. He curated it. Safety off. He murmured softly enough that only I heard it. I prefer diplomacy first, I replied under my breath. You prefer talking? That's literally my job. I stepped forward, tablet in hand. My shoes clicked against wet concrete, deliberate, steady. If I stopped moving, fear would have space to grow. My name is Ray Morgan, I continued. I represent Halcyon Financial Arbitration. We're here to discuss restructuring your outstanding debt. A wolf to the left snarled, not at the word debt, at the word restructuring. Interesting. Their alpha stood at the center, broad shoulders, dark hair slicked back from a face carved with exhaustion rather than arrogance. Darius, according to the file, 42, took leadership after the previous alpha died in a territorial dispute that had suspiciously coincided with a loan approval from Halcyon. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in months. You brought an executioner, Darius said, nodding toward Liam. Liam's jaw flexed once. I brought security, I corrected lightly. Negotiations can be emotional. We don't need security to sign papers. The wind shifted. I caught it then. Beneath the salt and oil. Fear, not sharp, aggressive fear. Cornered fear. Behind Darius, I noticed 2 younger wolves, barely adults. One of them, a girl, maybe 18, stood slightly behind the others, chin high but shoulders trembling. This wasn't a room of predators looking to cheat a lender. This was a room waiting to be slaughtered. I scrolled the contract on my tablet. The current outstanding amount is $12 million, including interest. Interest that tripled overnight, Darius cut in. Variable rates were outlined in a clause written in a dialect only betas like you can read, he snapped. That hit closer than he intended. He wasn't wrong. Corporate contracts for wolves weren't just legal documents. They were layered with archaic enforcement language, blood-binding phrasing. Most alphas didn't bother learning because they trusted muscle over syntax. I had built a career on the opposite. I'm not here to argue semantics, I said evenly. I'm here to prevent escalation. A muscle jumped in Darius's cheek. Escalation is already scheduled. The way he said it, like it was a calendar event, made my stomach tighten. Behind me, I felt Liam shift his weight. Not nervous. Alert. Scheduled? I asked. Darius's eyes flicked to the tablet in my hands. Scroll, he said quietly. I frowned but obeyed, expanding the document. It was the standard restructuring template Halcyon used for distressed territories. Interest, asset forfeiture, conditional annexation. Then I noticed the grayed-out subsection at the bottom. Hidden behind collapsed metadata. My pulse stuttered once. That wasn't standard. I tapped it open. The screen refreshed. And there it was. Clause 14C. Territorial neutralization contingency. If the debtor pack fails to meet accelerated repayment benchmarks within 30 days, Halcyon retains the right to initiate territorial neutralization procedures to ensure asset recovery and risk mitigation. Neutralization. Clean word. Polished. Corporate. It meant liquidation. Not of property. Of wolves. The warehouse seemed to grow colder. I wasn't shown this version, I said quietly. Darius gave a humorless smile. No. You were shown the one that makes you feel useful. Behind him, one of the younger wolves muttered something about drones spotted near the shoreline last night. Liam stepped closer to me. Not possessive. Protective. You knew, he said to Darius. We read the full document, Darius replied. We may not speak your legal language fluently, but we know what neutralization means. Another wolf raised his weapon, not aimed, just trembling in his grip. That's why you came armed, I murmured. Wouldn't you? I looked down at the contract again. The interest spike. The timing of the territorial dispute months ago. The speed at which enforcement language had been embedded. This wasn't debt recovery. This was acquisition through extinction. Halcyon didn't want repayment. They wanted the land. And they wanted it empty. I swallowed slowly, heat creeping under my collar. No one had briefed me on a kill clause. Negotiators weren't supposed to need body counts in their projections. Behind me, Liam's voice was low. Ray. I didn't look at him. Did you know about this? I asked. That single syllable carried weight. Liam didn't lie well, not because he was honest, because he didn't care enough to decorate truth. If we don't sign, Darius said, you initiate it anyway. That's not how arbitration works, I said automatically. It is if you're not actually arbitrating. Silence pressed in. For the first time since I'd stepped into the warehouse, I felt something unfamiliar tighten in my chest. Not fear of them, fear of my own employer. I had negotiated dozens of brutal contracts. I'd watched smaller packs fold, merge, relocate. I'd told myself it was survival economics. But this was a firing squad disguised as a payment plan. The young wolf behind Darius met my eyes. There was no rage in her expression, only the quiet resignation of someone who had already packed her things. The bullet earlier hadn't been aggression. It had been panic. I locked the tablet and lowered it slowly. I need the full back-end file, I said. Darius studied me carefully. And if you don't get it? I met his gaze. Then, no one signs anything tonight. Behind me, Liam's presence felt closer now, like a steady wall at my back. 14 wolves. 1 alpha mercenary. 1 beta negotiator. And a contract that smelled like blood. For the first time in my career, I had the distinct, unwelcome sensation that I wasn't here to close a deal. I was here to make it look legitimate. And I didn't like being someone else's camouflage. The 38th floor of Halcyon's tower was designed to make you feel small. Glass walls. Glass desks. Glass doors that whispered shut like polite threats. The city stretched below in cold geometry. Silver rivers, grids of light, distant sirens swallowed by altitude. From up here, consequences looked theoretical. I stood at the window with my tablet in hand, replaying the contract. Clause 14C, Territorial Neutralization Contingency. The wording was elegant. That was the problem. Corporate extermination rarely shouted. It footnoted. Behind me, Liam leaned against the wall like gravity owed him money. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled. No visible tension. If the warehouse had unsettled him, it didn't show. They shot at you, he said flatly. You're still considering defending them. They didn't shoot at me, I replied without turning. They shot near me. There's a difference. That's generous. It's accurate. I zoomed in on the enforcement language. The contract wasn't written in modern legal syntax. It was layered in archaic phrasing, pre-integration dialect, the kind taught only in beta arbitration programs and quietly removed from public circulation decades ago. Most alphas didn't learn it. Most omegas weren't allowed near it. Betas like me? We built careers translating it. I highlighted a line halfway through the enforcement section. Initiation of reclamation shall bind upon the debtor's bloodline through sovereign mark and activated covenant seal. My pulse slowed. Liam. He pushed off the wall. What? It's already active. He stepped closer, eyes scanning the screen. I don't see anything glowing. It wouldn't, I said. The activation phrase is embedded. It doesn't require signature. It requires blood acknowledgement. He looked at me. They signed? No. I scrolled further down. 3 months ago, Darius had signed a temporary extension agreement after a territorial skirmish. A minor amendment. routine. But the language in that amendment contained a binding acknowledgement clause. Subtle, almost invisible. If blood is drawn in defense of contracted territory, covenant shall consider assent sustained. Liam's jaw tightened. They fought off another pack, he said. Yes. And that counted as agreement. Yes. Silence thickened between us. Their alpha bled, I added quietly. That's enough. The covenant seal had likely activated the moment Darius spilled blood, defending land that was already leveraged. They hadn't defaulted. They'd been positioned. Liam crossed his arms. So, this is what? A cleanup? A force transfer? Same difference. I turned to face him fully. No. It isn't. He held my gaze steadily. Calm, solid, unmoved. You're acting surprised, he said. I am surprised. You've negotiated dozens of hostile acquisitions. Hostile acquisition isn't extermination. Depends who's being acquired. I felt something hot rise under my ribs. That warehouse wasn't a war zone, I said. It was a waiting room. For what? For drones. The word hung there. He didn't deny it. We don't get paid to feel, Liam said evenly. The sentence landed like a closed door. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. No. I get paid to think. His eyes flicked. Not anger, not quite. Something sharper. You think you're the only one who does that? I think I'm the only one reading the whole document. He exhaled slowly. You think this is new? I think it's intentional. Before he could respond, the glass door slid open with a soft hydraulic sigh. Kelvin Archer entered like a fragrance advertisement. Perfect suit, precise hair, smile calibrated to 5 degrees warmer than necessary. Gentlemen, he said smoothly, I hear last night was lively. He smelled expensive. And insincere. There was a misunderstanding regarding transparency, I said. Kelvin's smile didn't falter. Ah. Clause 14C. So he knew. You didn't brief me, I said. I didn't think it required dramatization. Neutralization isn't dramatization. It's risk management. Liam remained silent, but I felt the shift in him, subtle recalibration. He was listening differently now. The covenant seal is partially active, I continued. Darius's blood triggered acknowledgement. Kelvin clasped his hands behind his back. Yes. That's how enforcement works. That wasn't disclosed. It was embedded in a dialect restricted to certified beta negotiators. Kelvin's eyes sharpened briefly. And you are certified, so you assumed I wouldn't object. He tilted his head slightly. I assumed you were pragmatic. There it was. Not denial. Not apology. Expectation. The kind that comes from men who've never had to question the morality of a clause. They can't repay, Kelvin continued lightly. The territory is strategically valuable. Industrial expansion. Port access. We've invested heavily in manipulating their debt curve, I said. Kelvin's smile thinned. You're implying misconduct. I'm stating pattern recognition. Liam finally spoke. If this is already in motion, what exactly do you need from us? Kelvin turned to him. Closure. Optics. A signed restructuring attempt legitimizes the reclamation sequence. Camouflage. The word echoed in my head. You were shown the version that makes you feel useful. Darius's voice from the warehouse. You want my signature, I said quietly. I want procedural integrity, Kelvin replied. You want a beta to translate slaughter into legal compliance. His expression cooled. You're becoming emotional. No, I said calmly. I'm becoming informed. The city lights flickered below us. Indifferent. Liam stepped closer to my side. Not touching, but near enough that I could feel the heat of him. You're overthinking, he murmured to me. And you're under questioning. Kelvin adjusted his cufflinks. The operation proceeds in 72 hours. I trust you'll handle your role professionally. The door whispered shut behind him. Silence filled the office again. Liam watched me for a long moment. You going to refuse? I don't know yet. You always know. I looked down at the contract, at the elegant cruelty woven into it. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating leverage. I was calculating damage. And for the first time, I wasn't sure whose side I was on. Liam's voice was quieter now. You walk away from this. They walk away from you. I met his eyes. I'm starting to think they already have. The underground market smelled like oil, burnt sugar, and secrets. It operated out of an abandoned metro line 3 stops past the last active station, a place the city had officially forgotten but never quite erased. Fluorescent strips flickered overhead. Vendors sold counterfeit IDs, wolf-safe supplements, illegal enchantment dampeners. Every face looked over its shoulder twice. I wasn't supposed to be there, which meant I definitely was. I kept my coat collar up and my tablet tucked under my arm. Betas move differently in places like this. Not dominant, not submissive. We slipped through spaces. We translated tension without amplifying it. A soft voice behind a pillar said, "You came alone." I stopped. "No," I replied. "I came discreetly." Mira stepped out from the shadow of a broken ticket kiosk. Up close, she looked younger than I remembered. Dark curls tied back carelessly, sharp cheekbones, eyes too old for 18. Her wool flickered faintly under her skin when she got agitated, a ripple at her jaw, a tension in her fingers. "You shouldn't have answered my message," I said quietly. "You shouldn't have sent it," she shot back. "Fair. You're the negotiator," she said. "You read everything. I try. Then, you know this isn't about money." I gestured toward a narrow stairwell leading down to the decommissioned platform. "Walk with me." The old tracks were rusted into permanent silence. A few lanterns lit makeshift stalls farther down, but this stretch was empty enough for conversation without witnesses. Mira leaned against a cracked pillar. "They said it was a protection loan," she began. "Another pack was pushing into our docks. We don't have numbers, we don't have political backing. So we borrowed. From Halcyon." She nodded once. "They said they'd help us secure our territory. Legal shields. Arbitration support. And in exchange," I prompted gently, "revenue percentage until repayment. Reasonable. On paper, what was the original rate? 4%. And now," she gave a humorless laugh, 23. My jaw tightened. "That's not fluctuation. That's manipulation." She shrugged. "Every time we thought we were close to stabilizing, the interest recalculated." "It recalculated," I repeated slowly. "Yes, magically recalculated." I opened my tablet and pulled up the covenant code. Deep within the financial appendix, there was a subroutine I hadn't paid enough attention to. An adaptive interest clause tied to territorial instability metrics. If the system detected risk events within a contracted zone, it triggered a compounding escalation. Risk events like territorial conflict. "You were attacked," I said. Her eyes sharpened. "Yes. By who?" She hesitated. "Another pack. Name?" "Gray Harbor." I frowned. Gray Harbor had been dismantled last year. Officially. "Are you sure?" She stared at me. "I know who tore into our docks." My pulse ticked up. Either Gray Harbor hadn't been fully dismantled, or someone was wearing their scent. "Every fight made the interest jump," she continued. "We defended ourselves. We bled. The numbers changed. Blood acknowledgement. Activation sustained. They engineered your instability," I said quietly. Her jaw clenched. "We didn't default." "No," I agreed. "You were positioned." A sudden metallic click echoed behind us. Too crisp. Too synchronized. Mira's pupils blew wide. "You brought them," she hissed. "I didn't." Footsteps above. Boots. Not market vendors. Professional. Liam's voice came through my earpiece. Low and irritated. "You said discreet. You didn't say reckless." "You're tracking me," I muttered. "I'm not an idiot." 3 figures emerged from the stairwell. Tactical gear. No insignia. No pack scent. Corporate. "Halcyon Security?" I called out calmly. No answer. One of them raised a rifle. "Run," I told Mira. The first shot cracked through the tunnel. Concrete exploded near my shoulder. I dropped. dragging Mira down with me as another round ricocheted off the track. From the shadows to my right, Liam moved. Fast, precise. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He closed distance. A body hit the ground with a sickening thud. Another shot. Then another. I crawled toward a support beam, heart pounding, adrenaline sharp and metallic in my mouth. "You were followed," Mira gasped. "I wasn't," I snapped. "We were sold." One of the shooters advanced down the track. Before I could warn Liam, a sound tore through the tunnel. Not human. Not controlled. A growl. Deep. Raw. Instinctive. It vibrated through my ribs. Liam. He didn't fully shift, but the alpha in him surfaced undeniable. Shoulders broader, eyes lit with something ancient and furious. The advancing shooter hesitated. Big mistake. Liam slammed him into the concrete wall hard enough to crack tile. Silence fell in broken pieces. Breathing. Distant market panic. Mira stared at Liam like he was a myth stepping into focus. "You're with him," she whispered. "Yes," I said, more quickly than I meant to. Liam turned toward me, chest rising steadily. A thin line of blood traced down his forearm, not his. "You're impossible to supervise," he muttered. "You're welcome." He stepped closer, checking me quickly for injury without asking permission. His hand brushed the back of my neck, firm and grounding. I felt it then. Heat. Solid. Alive. For a split second, the world narrowed to that contact. The warmth of him anchoring me in a place that had almost turned into a kill corridor. It scared me. Not the bullets, not the betrayal. The way my body reacted to his proximity. Comfort shouldn't feel like that. "We need to move," he said quietly. Mira was still staring. "They sent them to erase you," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Why?" Because I'd started reading too closely. Because someone inside Halcyon knew I'd noticed. I looked at the fallen security agents. No insignia, no documentation, disposable. "Someone doesn't want this investigated," I said. Liam's jaw tightened. "Then we investigate faster." He offered his hand to help me up. I hesitated only a fraction of a second before taking it. His grip was steady, unyielding. For the first time since this started, I didn't feel like camouflage. I felt like a variable, and someone had just tried to remove me from the equation. Rain hit the glass in disciplined streaks. The private negotiation room on the 38th floor was designed to absorb conflict. Dark walnut walls, soundproof panels, a long table polished to a mirror sheen. It was the kind of room where careers ended politely. I liked it less tonight. My tablet lay open in front of me. 3 financial ledgers layered over one another. I'd bypassed the surface dashboard and dug into internal asset flows, the kind of deep accounting only beta negotiators were trained to interpret. Across the table, Liam stood instead of sitting, arms crossed, watching the door like he expected it to grow teeth. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm busy. You almost got shot." Correction. I almost got erased. He didn't smile. I zoomed into the debt's transaction history. Halcyon Financial, Harbor Recovery Division, Asset Liquidation Holdings, back to Halcyon under a different subsidiary. 3 transfers in 6 months. The principal amount inflated at each handoff. Son of a... I stopped myself. What? They resold the debt internally. That's normal. No, I said sharply. Restructured debt can be packaged. But this wasn't restructuring. This was cycling. I rotated the tablet toward him. Every time the debt changed hands, the interest recalibrated. Not based on market rate, based on risk scoring. And the risk scoring was influenced by territorial instability, the same instability they'd allegedly borrowed money to prevent. Rain intensified against the glass. They attacked their docks, Liam said slowly. Yes. To raise the risk profile. Yes. So the interest spiked. Yes. So they defaulted faster. Yes. And then the contract triggers neutralization. I met his eyes. Exactly. He looked back at the screen again. For a moment, something like understanding flickered there. Then something darker. You think Kelvin knew? I think Kelvin curated it. The door handle shifted slightly. We both looked up. No knock. Just a test. Then silence again. Liam moved subtly closer to me. You think he sent the team in the metro? I think someone did. And you think that someone is on this floor? Yes. He exhaled once through his nose. That makes us inconvenient. Very. He stared at the rain beyond the glass. Halcyon doesn't leave loose ends. I studied him carefully. That bother you? He didn't answer immediately. I've been the loose end before, he said finally. I didn't interrupt. When a job goes wrong, he continued, voice even, you remove exposure. Assets, witnesses, intermediaries. Negotiators, I added. Yes. The word hung heavy between us. Have you ever asked why? I said quietly. He looked at me. Why? What? Why you were sent somewhere. Why a target was labeled hostile. Why a pack needed removing. That's not the assignment. That wasn't the question. Jaw flexed. I execute contracts. You enforce them. Same thing. No, I said. It isn't. He turned away from me slightly, hands braced on the edge of the table. I grew up in enforcement, he said. Alphas protect territory, protect hierarchy, protect stability, by eliminating threats. Yes, and who defines the threat? Silence. The rain grew louder. He didn't like this line of conversation. I could feel it in the way his shoulders tightened. I don't write the contracts, he said. No. You enforce them. His gaze snapped back to mine. And you translate them. There it was. Shared culpability. I'm starting to think that's worse, I said softly. He studied me for a long moment. You're thinking about refusing. I'm thinking about surviving. That's not the same. I closed the tablet. It is if someone inside this building is already cleaning house. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His expression changed. Subtle, but I knew him well enough now to see it. What? Internal bulletin, he said, about metro disturbance and 3 unidentified agitators neutralized. 1 external consultant under review for breach of operational protocol. Consultant. Me. I felt something cold settle under my ribs. They're building narrative, I said. Yes. If I become unstable, they can discredit any objections. Yes. And if that fails, he didn't answer. They remove both of us, I finished. Yes. The room felt smaller. For the first time since I'd met him, Liam looked uncertain, not afraid, not weak, but recalculating. You've always followed orders, I said carefully. Yes. Even when they were ugly. Yes. Why? He didn't respond immediately. His gaze drifted toward the window again, toward the rain-smeared skyline. Because someone has to enforce structure, he said. Without structure, packs tear each other apart. And if the structure itself is rotten, his shoulders went still. That was the question. I watched the conflict move through him, not explosive, not dramatic, just quiet erosion. I've never needed to ask that, he admitted. And now, he looked at me. Now he was asking. The door opened smoothly. Kelvin stepped in, smile polished and warm. Gentlemen, he said. I trust we're aligned. I didn't look away from Liam when I answered. Alignment, I said calmly, depends on transparency. Kelvin's smile didn't shift. Transparency is a luxury, he replied lightly. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, and for the first time in his life, I think Liam understood what it meant to stand on the wrong side of a contract, not as an enforcer, but as a target. The parking garage under Halcyon's tower was always too clean for a place meant to store machines. Polished concrete, fluorescent lights that hummed like they were bored, security cameras blinking red in the corners, watching every breath like it was a liability. At 2 a.m, it felt less like a garage and more like the underside of a ship, hollow, echoing, and quietly hostile. Liam walked half a step behind me as we moved between rows of black sedans with tinted windows. His presence was a steady pressure at my back, the kind that made my instincts want to either lean into it or run from it. I didn't do either. I kept my pace even, and my eyes forward. Kelvin smiled too much, I said, mostly to fill the silence. He always does, Liam replied. Is that an alpha thing? That's a liar thing. I let out a short laugh, then immediately regretted it when the sound bounced off the concrete and came back sharper. We reached our vehicle, an unremarkable corporate SUV with a tracking chip. I was 90% sure Kelvin personally kissed goodnight. Liam's hand hovered near the door handle, then paused. He frowned slightly, like he'd heard something I hadn't. What? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to me, eyes narrowing. Did you feel that? Feel what? Liam's gaze dropped. To your hands. My stomach tightened. I looked down. At first, I saw nothing but pale skin and the faint lines of my knuckles. Then the light above us flickered, and something beneath my skin shifted. A thin black line surfaced along the inside of my wrist, like ink bleeding through paper. It pulsed once, slow and deliberate, then spread in branching geometry, not random, not organic, designed. I swallowed hard. No, I breathed. The mark climbed toward my palm, curling into a symbol that made my teeth ache just from looking at it. The shape resembled a legal seal drawn by someone who hated mercy. Concentric rings, jagged strokes, a spiral that refused to end. I'd seen it before. In the contract, in the enforcement glyphs. My fingers went cold. That's a covenant trigger, I whispered. Liam's face sharpened instantly, all softness erased. What did they do? My voice caught. I forced air in. It's activating. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard, not bruising, but firm enough to anchor me. His thumb brushed the edge of the symbol, as if he could wipe it away with pressure alone. The mark responded. It flared. Hot. I hissed and jerked instinctively, the pain bright and clean, like someone snapping a rubber band across my nerves. Ray. Liam's voice dropped low. Dangerous. Tell me what it means. I stared at my own skin like it had betrayed me personally. It means the contract is partially binding to the executor chain. What? I forced myself to focus, to translate instead of panic. The neutralization clause needs procedural legitimacy, I said. A signature attempt. A negotiation record. Something that looks clean. We know that, but if it fails, my throat tightened. If the debtor isn't neutralized within the window, the enforcement burden transfers. To who? I laughed once. Sharp, humorless. To the people who touched it. Liam's eyes went colder. Us. Mostly you, I said. But. I lifted my marked hand. They slipped me into the executor line. That's why Kelvin needed my involvement. I'm not just optics. You're collateral. I'm insurance. The words tasted like metal. Liam released my wrist slowly, but he didn't step back. He studied the mark, jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping. They tied you in, he said. Yes. Without your consent. Welcome to corporate America, I muttered. The mark pulsed again. This time it didn't burn. It pulled, like a hook under my skin, tugging somewhere deeper than flesh. My breath hitched. For a second, the garage blurred at the edges, light smearing, sound dampening, and I saw something that wasn't there. A shoreline, dark water, a pack running, then a flash of red on concrete. Blood. Darius's blood. The covenant seal feeding. I blinked hard and the vision snapped away, leaving me with nausea and a cold sweat on my spine. Okay, I said, voice too bright. That's new. Liam's gaze shot to my face. What did you see? Nothing. I tried to smile. Failed. Something. He stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, the steady pulse of an alpha body built for conflict and survival. Ray, he said quietly, look at me. I did. His eyes were the color of storm clouds over steel. Not warm, not comforting, but steady. Breathe, he ordered. I hated how well my body listened. I inhaled slowly. Then again. The mark cooled, the pain receding slightly as my heartbeat steadied. Good, Liam murmured, His hand lifted, not to grab my wrist this time, to touch my neck, just under my jaw, where my pulse fluttered. The contact was slow, deliberate, as if he was giving me the choice to pull away. My skin heated instantly, like it recognized him before my brain did. I stiffened. It wasn't fear of him. Not exactly. It was the terrifying awareness of what it meant to want something dangerous. "Don't do that," I said hoarsely. "Do what? Be gentle." His thumb brushed the side of my throat. "Barely there." "That's not what you're afraid of," he said. I swallowed. "Isn't it?" He didn't answer. He just held my gaze, close enough to make the air between us feel charged. I hated that my first instinct was to lean in. I hated it more that my second instinct was to trust him. "I'm tired," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could wrap them in sarcasm. "I'm tired of being useful. Convenient. The guy who makes ugly things sound reasonable." Liam's expression shifted, a crack in the armor. "You're not convenient," he said. "That's funny, because Halcyon seems to think I'm very—" His hand tightened slightly on my neck, not possessive. "Grounding. Ray," he said. Low. "They marked you because you matter." I laughed, breathless. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. "Congratulations, you've been weaponized." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then the mark pulsed again, harder. Pain lanced up my arm, quick and vicious. I cursed under my breath and leaned forward instinctively. Liam caught me without hesitation, one arm around my shoulders, keeping me upright. The touch was immediate, sure, like he'd been waiting for the moment to justify it. I pushed weakly against his chest. "Don't get used to this," I muttered. "Too late," he replied, voice flat. I breathed once, twice, trying to ride out the sting. When it faded, I forced a shaky grin. "If I die," I said, "make sure it's dramatic." Liam looked down at me, unimpressed. "You're already dramatic." I should have laughed harder. Instead, I felt my throat tighten, because for the first time the threat wasn't abstract. It wasn't a clause on a screen. It was ink under my skin. A timer, a leash. And Liam, cold, lethal Liam, was staring at it like it was a personal insult. "They did this to control you," he said quietly. "They did it to control us," I corrected. His eyes darkened. "No," he said. "They did it to control you." I held his gaze, pulse still racing under his fingers. The garage hummed around us. Cameras blinked. Lights buzzed. And somewhere above, in the glass and steel stomach of Halcyon, Kelvin Archer was probably sipping something expensive and congratulating himself on a clean operation. I looked down at the black mark on my wrist. Then back at Liam. "Tell me something," I said softly. "What? If this goes bad?" I swallowed. "If they come for me." Liam's hand didn't move from my neck. His voice was quiet, dead certain. "Then they're going to have to come through me first." The words should have scared me. They didn't. That was the problem. The boardroom was colder than the parking garage. Not physically. The temperature was perfectly regulated. The air smelled faintly of citrus and money. But the long glass table, the black leather chairs, the skyline slicing the horizon behind floor-to-ceiling windows, it all radiated a kind of sterilized indifference. 10 directors, 2 legal counsels, Kelvin Archer at the head of the table, and me. I stood. I didn't sit. The mark on my wrist had faded to a dull shadow, but I could still feel it, like a quiet pulse beneath the surface. "Mr. Morgan," Kelvin said pleasantly, "we're ready for your signature." A stylus lay beside the digital document projected onto the center of the table. Clause 14C glowed faintly in legal gray. Territorial neutralization contingency. It looked harmless in 12-point font. "I'm not signing," I said. The words landed harder than I expected. They echoed slightly in the polished room. A director on the left adjusted his glasses. "Excuse me?" "I've reviewed the internal debt cycle," I continued, voice steady. The interest escalation was artificially inflated through internal asset transfers. The debtor pack was positioned for default. A faint rustle of discomfort moved around the table. Kelvin didn't blink. That's a strong allegation. It's a factual observation. He leaned back slightly, fingers steepled. Even if that were true, the enforcement clause remains valid. No, I replied. It becomes coercive. A thin smile curved his mouth. Coercion is subjective. Extinction isn't. Silence thickened. One of the legal counsel spoke carefully. Mr. Morgan, your role is procedural arbitration, not ethical commentary. My role, I said, is to ensure lawful compliance, and this is lawful on paper, I said, not in intent. Kelvin's expression cooled a fraction. Intent, he said lightly, is irrelevant in contract law. Behind me, the door opened. Liam entered without hurry. He didn't look at the board first. He looked at me. In my chest tightened. Kelvin gestured toward him casually. Perhaps Mr. Cross can provide context. Liam's face was unreadable. What context? He said. The preliminary authorization? I frowned slightly. What authorization? Kelvin tapped the screen. A second document surfaced. Shorter, cleaner, efficient. Pre-execution authorization. Conditional. Signed. By Liam Cross. The room tilted for a second. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting. His name was there. Digital seal. Date stamped 3 days ago. Before the warehouse. Before the metro. Before the mark appeared on my skin. You signed this, I said quietly. Liam didn't look away. Yes. The word struck harder than any bullet. Why? To contain liability, he said evenly. To contain, I laughed once, sharp. You authorized escalation. I authorized conditional preparation. You greenlit the operation. I prevented immediate activation. My pulse spiked. By signing ahead of me? Yes. The board watched like spectators at a sport they'd already bet on. Kelvin spoke softly, almost sympathetically. Mr. Cross understood the necessity of decisive action. I didn't look at Kelvin. I couldn't. My eyes stayed locked on Liam. You said you didn't know, I said. I didn't know about the internal manipulation, he replied. I knew neutralization was an option. And you were fine with that. I was fine with protecting you. The room went silent. What? I said flatly. The executor chain was incomplete, Liam continued. Without preliminary authorization, they could have activated emergency enforcement without oversight. You would have been marked immediately. I was marked anyway. Yes, he said. After you started digging, anger flared hot and fast. So you decided for me. I bought time. You signed me into a kill clause. I absorbed primary liability, he snapped. That cut through the room. Even the directors shifted. What does that mean? I asked. It means, he said, voice tightening for the first time, if neutralization proceeds, the enforcement burden transfers to me first. The air felt thin. They tied you in, I said slowly. Yes, voluntarily. Yes, my throat burned. You don't get to decide what risks I take. And you don't get to walk into corporate warfare without armor. I'm not your responsibility. His jaw clenched. You are now. That wasn't possessive. It was declarative. Kelvin rose smoothly. This is unnecessary drama, he said. The operation window has opened. The wall display shifted. Live satellite feed. Drones lifting from a coastal facility. Coordinates blinking over the port district. My stomach dropped. You're launching, I said. Yes, Kelvin replied calmly. With or without your signature. I turned back to the board. If you proceed, the internal debt manipulation becomes discoverable. A director spoke sharply. Discoverable by whom? Anyone who looks. Kelvin's gaze sharpened. That sounds like a threat. It's a warning. The satellite feed zoomed closer. I could see the outline of the docks, the warehouse. Mira, Darius. Stand down, I said. Kelvin's expression didn't move. This vote has already passed. My heart pounded in my ears. You're about to commit extermination over falsified risk metrics. We're reclaiming assets. Liam stepped forward. If this goes live, he said quietly, you escalate enforcement chain. Kelvin's eyes flicked to him. That was understood. You understand what that means? Yes, Kelvin said softly. It means you fulfill your contractual obligation. The room went very still. The implication hung between them. Disposable. I felt something fracture inside my chest. Not fear, not doubt. Clarity. They never intended to let us walk away, I said. No, Liam replied. The drone feed shifted. Engines roared faintly through the speakers. The operation had begun. I looked at the table, at the stylus, at the contract glowing patiently. I won't sign, I said again. Kelvin's smile returned, thinner now. Then you'll be recorded as non-compliant. Then, record it. Outside the window, thunder rolled across the skyline. On the screen, the first drone crossed the harbor. And somewhere beneath that cold corporate ceiling, a pack that had never defaulted was about to be hunted. Liam moved closer to me, not touching, not yet, but aligned. For the first time since this started, we weren't on opposite sides of the table. We were standing on the same fault line, and it was about to split open. The server center felt nothing like the boardroom. No glass, no skyline, no polished morality, just concrete corridors, white LED strips, and the low, constant hum of machines processing other people's ruin. Halcyon stored its enforcement architecture 3 floors below the parking garage, behind biometric locks and a security team that preferred rifles to discussion, which meant Liam had opinions about my plan. You distract, he said flatly as we stood near the reinforced access door. I extract. Yes, that's backwards. That's strategy. It's reckless. It's efficient. He gave me a look that clearly translated to, I am reconsidering my life choices. The mark on my wrist pulsed faintly. Not pain this time, just a reminder. The operation window had opened. The drones were already moving toward the docks. We had maybe 20 minutes before escalation hit full authorization. If the Covenant seal is binding through manipulated risk metrics, I said quickly, then it violates foundational enforcement doctrine. Translate, Liam said. Contracts cannot be executed if material risk was artificially engineered by the lender. And you can prove that. I can prove debt cycling. That's not the same as proving orchestration. No, I admitted, which is why we need internal threat simulation logs. He blinked once. You're stealing evidence. I prefer acquiring clarity. The access panel beeped as Liam swiped a security override card he absolutely wasn't supposed to have. The door slid open. Cold air spilled out. The temperature carefully controlled for server stability. Rows of black racks stretched into the distance like a digital cathedral. We moved fast. I pulled up the internal architecture on my tablet and began tracing the risk recalibration triggers. Halcyon uses predictive conflict modeling, I muttered. They feed territorial volatility into interest curves. And if someone manually adjusted volatility inputs, you have artificial default. Exactly. Footsteps echoed from the far corridor. Security, already. 10 minutes, Liam said quietly. 5. I located the volatility dashboard, and there it was. Manual override flags. 3 of them. Time-stamped within 24 hours of each dock skirmish. Input source, executive access. Kelvin Archer. My heart pounded. That's it, I whispered. You have proof. I have manipulation. I need correlation. A security voice echoed down the corridor. Mr. Morgan. Mr. Cross. Step away from the equipment. 3 armed guards appeared at the far end of the aisle. Weapons raised. Professional. Predictable. I didn't turn around immediately. Give me 30 seconds, I said softly to Liam. You have 15. I raised my hands slowly and pivoted to face the guards. Gentlemen, I said brightly, this is an internal audit. Step away from the terminal. I'm almost finished. Now. One of them stepped closer. Liam shifted beside me. Subtle, Coiled. Easy, I murmured without looking at him. The guard's rifle aimed directly at my chest. Accessing enforcement systems without authorization is grounds for immediate detainment. Detainment, I echoed. That's dramatic. The mark on my wrist flared faintly. The drones were nearing target range. I turned my tablet outward so they could see the screen. Do you know what happens if enforcement proceeds under falsified volatility inputs? The guard didn't answer. Contract nullification, I continued calmly. Full liability inversion. Every executor in the chain becomes legally exposed. His grip tightened on the rifle. Step away. I smiled faintly. I'm trying to protect you. Behind me, Liam's voice was quiet. Ray. 10 seconds, I replied. I turned slightly, letting the guard see the volatility logs. Executive override flags. 3 instances. All raising territorial instability metrics within minutes of pack conflict. The guard hesitated. Even muscle understood risk. Halcyon engineered the threat profile, I said, which means neutralization is coercive. Which means every one of you pulling a trigger tonight becomes complicit. One of them faltered. The other steadied. We follow orders, and when the orders collapse in court, the mark pulsed again. Stronger. Time was up. Ray, Liam said sharply. Got it, I replied. I hit execute. The internal report compiled, linking override timestamps with satellite pathing and debt recalculations. Correlation achieved. Proof of artificial risk inflation, I breathed. The guard lunged forward. Liam moved. Fast. One rifle hit the floor. Another guard slammed into a server rack. No excessive brutality. Just precise incapacitation. I ducked as a third guard swung toward me, and Liam intercepted him with terrifying efficiency. For a split second, the alpha in him surfaced again, not full shift, but enough that the air thickened with dominance. He didn't roar this time. He didn't need to. The guard froze. Liam stepped close, voice low and lethal. You're not dying for Kelvin. The guard's eyes flicked to me, then to the tablet still glowing in my hands. The internal report pulsed complete. I looked at the final line. Volatility manipulation confirmed. Enforcement clause invalid under Doctrine 3.12. Coercive asset acquisition. There it was. The loophole. If I upload this to the public arbitration ledger, I said quietly, the covenant seal collapses. The guard swallowed. You'll ruin the company. No, I corrected. Kelvin did. Liam turned to me. Do it. The mark on my wrist burned once more, sharp, like a warning. The drones would be seconds from authorization strike. I hesitated for only half a heartbeat. Then I hit upload. The server hummed louder for a split second. Somewhere above us in the boardroom, the system would already be flagging anomaly. On my wrist, the black lines flickered. Not gone, but destabilized. Alarms began to wail. Unauthorized data breach, a synthetic voice announced. The guards backed away instinctively. Liam stepped to my side. Tell me that was enough. I looked at the status bar climbing toward public registry confirmation. It has to be. The mark pulsed again. Then cracked. A thin fracture ran through the spiral symbol on my skin, like ink breaking under pressure. I exhaled shakily. Liability inversion initiated, I whispered. Above us, the drones would be receiving override commands. If the system recognized the contract as coercive, neutralization authority would suspend automatically. If not, the server lights flickered once, then stabilized. My tablet chimed. Public ledger updated. Covenant under review. Enforcement paused pending arbitration. The mark on my wrist dimmed. Not erased, but weakened. Liam exhaled slowly. You just declared war. I met his eyes. No, I said. I just read the fine print. Alarms still screamed around us. Security teams were mobilizing. But for the first time since the warehouse, the contract wasn't controlling us. It was unraveling. And somewhere at the docks, a pack that had been seconds from extinction was still breathing. For now, the alarm stopped all at once. Not faded. Stopped. The kind of silence that follows when something larger than panic takes control. We were still in the server corridor when my tablet vibrated again. Not a warning this time, but a confirmation. Public arbitration ledger, review accepted, enforcement suspended. My knees almost gave out. For a fraction of a second, I just stared at the words like they might disappear if I blinked too hard. Then the mark on my wrist burned. Not sharp, not violent, hot, like metal cooling after being pulled from a forge. The black spiral flickered, lines thinning, the jagged geometry losing cohesion. And then it cracked. A thin fracture split the center seal. The spiral unraveled. The ink-like veins receded under my skin, fading from black to gray, to nothing but faint pink irritation. I exhaled. It felt like I'd been holding my breath since the warehouse. Ray. Liam's voice sounded wrong. Lower. Unsteady. I looked up. He was leaning slightly against one of the server racks, left hand pressed to his side. For half a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then I saw the blood, dark against his shirt. "Are you kidding me?" I snapped, moving toward him. "You waited until after the legal breakthrough to start bleeding?" "Timing," he muttered. I grabbed his arm and pulled his hand away. A bullet crease across his ribs, not deep, not clean either. "You got hit back there," I said. "Yes. And you didn't think to mention that. You were busy rewriting corporate doctrine." I pressed my jacket against the wound, harder than necessary. He didn't flinch. He never did. "You're infuriating," I said. "You're dramatic." I shot him a glare. Then my tablet chimed again. Covenant seal status. Void pending tribunal review. Void. The word felt unreal. Somewhere above us, the drones would have received abort commands. The strike window closed. The pack was still alive. Liam's breathing was steady, but I could see the tension behind it. Not pain, not fear. Release. "They're safe," I said quietly. He looked at me, searching my face like he needed visual confirmation. "They're safe," I repeated. For the first time since I'd met him, Liam let his head tip back against the metal rack. Just for a second, just enough to show the weight he'd been carrying. "I didn't think you'd find it," he admitted. "I always find it. That's what worries me." Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor, but this time slower, uncertain. Corporate security recalibrating. No immediate gunfire. We'd changed the narrative. Halcyon couldn't proceed without exposing the manipulation logs now archived in public registry. Kelvin couldn't erase that. I looked back at my wrist. No mark. Just skin. The absence felt strange, like losing a bruise you'd grown used to pressing. "You were tied into the executor chain," I said quietly. "Yes. And now," he said, pushing off the server rack despite my protest. "The chain's broken." I stepped in front of him. "You signed that preliminary authorization." "Yes." "Without telling me." "Yes." I hated how calm he sounded. "You don't get to make decisions about my life," I said. "I know. Do you?" "Yes." Silence stretched between us, not hostile, not soft, just honest. "I signed it," he said finally, "because I knew how this ends for negotiators who dig too deep. And I would rather carry enforcement liability myself than watch you get erased." My chest tightened. "That wasn't your call." "No," he agreed. "It wasn't." Rain began tapping faintly against distant infrastructure above us, a soft echo from the storm outside. "I've followed orders my entire life," he continued, voice quieter now. "Alpha structure, corporate structure, contract structure, and today," he looked directly at me. "Today, I chose." My pulse stuttered. "Chose what?" He didn't hesitate. "I chose you." "Not the contract." The words landed heavy, not dramatic, not loud, certain. My throat went dry. "You barely tolerate me," I managed. "That's not the same thing." "Close enough." He stepped closer, despite the blood still seeping faintly under my improvised bandage. "You think this is about tolerance," he said. "It's not." The space between us felt charged again, like the parking garage, like the moment his hand had steadied my pulse. Dangerous. Grounding. You destabilize systems, he said. You read what other people ignore. You refuse to make extinction sound reasonable. That's not exactly romantic. It's not supposed to be. His gaze softened just slightly. It's necessary. I swallowed. You could have walked away, I said. Yes. You didn't. No. The alarms had stopped. The hum of the servers felt almost peaceful now. Above us, a corporation was scrambling to contain reputational hemorrhage. And below, in a concrete corridor that smelled faintly of ozone and blood, an alpha who had never questioned an order had just broken one. For me, you're still bleeding, I said, because focusing on that felt safer. I'll survive. You'd better. A faint smile touched his mouth. That sounds almost affectionate. Don't push it. He shifted slightly, wincing only when he thought I wasn't looking. We need to move, he said. Kelvin won't accept this quietly. No, I agreed. He won't. But for the first time since this began, I didn't feel like camouflage. I didn't feel like collateral. I felt like a variable that had rewritten the outcome. And beside me stood an alpha who had chosen defiance over obedience. The contract was void. The pack was alive. And whatever came next, it wouldn't be dictated by fine print. It would be chosen. The office smelled like gasoline and coffee. Not expensive coffee. Real coffee. The kind that stained mugs and didn't apologize for it. We were above a motorcycle repair shop 3 blocks from the harbor. Not the polished side with yachts and corporate docks, but the loud, honest side with fishing boats and rusted chains. The sign downstairs read, Cross and Torque Motor Works. The sign on our door upstairs was newer, hand-painted, slightly crooked. Gray clause, arbitration, and protective consultancy. Consultancy sounds expensive, I said, stepping back to evaluate the lettering. It sounds legal, Liam replied from behind me. We'd been released from Halcyon 2 days after the public tribunal accepted the review. Kelvin's smile had been flawless when HR escorted us out. Non-compliance, data breach, operational misconduct, the usual poetry. Halcyon was restructuring its executive team under internal investigation. Kelvin Archer had resigned, temporarily. We both knew he'd surface somewhere else eventually. Predators rarely retired. But for now, the docks were quiet. Darius stood in our doorway, filling it almost completely. The exhaustion hadn't left his face, but something else had replaced it. Relief. Behind him, Mira hovered near the stairwell, pretending not to look too emotional. You didn't have to do that, Darius said. Yes, we did, I replied automatically. He held my gaze for a long moment. No, he said quietly. You didn't. The pack's debt had been frozen pending arbitration. The volatility manipulation logs were now public record. Other packs had begun reviewing their own contracts. Halcyon's stock had dipped 12%. I considered that a reasonable exchange rate. Mira stepped forward, holding out a small wooden token carved with a wolf's head. For protection, she said awkwardly. I blinked. I'm a beta negotiator. I don't carry talismans. You do now, she said. Liam took it gently and handed it to me. Consider it a retainer, he murmured. I rolled my eyes, but I slipped it into my pocket anyway. When the pack left, they didn't slink away like fugitives. They walked down the stairs together, unified. From the open window I heard it then. A single howl. Low, strong. Another joined it. Then another, not frantic, not terrified. Just present. I leaned against the desk and let the sound settle into my chest. They're reclaiming their territory, Liam said quietly. Yes, you destabilized more than one contract. I read the fine print. He studied me. You're not going back to corporate arbitration. It wasn't a question. No. Good. I arched a brow. You're not either. He stepped closer. No. Silence stretched between us. Not tense this time. Intentional. We're unemployed, I said. We're autonomous, he corrected. That's optimistic. It's accurate. I glanced at the freshly painted sign again. Gray clause, I said. A loophole that protects instead of exploits. You named it after instability. I named it After Balance. He tilted his head slightly. That's very beta of you. I narrowed my eyes. Careful. A faint smile ghosted his mouth. You're still dramatic. And you're still bleeding through your bandage. He looked down briefly. It's superficial. So is your tolerance for medical advice. I stepped closer to adjust the edge of the wrap around his ribs. My fingers brushed warm skin. Solid. Real. He didn't move away. Neither did I. The city noise drifted up through the open window. Engines, distant voices, the rhythmic clank of tools downstairs. Ordinary. Alive. If this fails, I said quietly, not looking up, we don't have corporate shields. I don't need shields. That's not reassuring. He waited until I finally met his eyes. I chose, he said again, softer now. I'm not unchoosing. Something in my chest eased. Not fireworks, not melodrama. Just steadiness. You realize this means I'll question everything, I warned. I expect it. And if I think you're wrong, you'll tell me. I will. He nodded once. Good. I exhaled slowly. Sometimes being a beta doesn't mean being compliant. Sometimes it means refusing to translate cruelty into something palatable. And sometimes being an alpha doesn't mean enforcing the structure. Sometimes it means choosing which structure deserves to stand. Outside, another howl rose, this one stronger, answered by others. Not a warning, not a plea, a claim. I stepped back toward the window. New rules, I said quietly. Liam came to stand beside me. New rules, he agreed. Below us, the harbor lights flickered against dark water. No drones, no contracts glowing in hidden clauses. Just a city adjusting to a fracture it hadn't anticipated. I glanced at him once more. Try not to sign anything without reading it, I said. He huffed softly. Try not to dismantle corporations before breakfast. No promises. The howl echoed again. Full, unapologetic. And this time, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like freedom.